Hello, everyone. We'll just wait 1 or 2 minutes to let people join, and then we'll start this webinar. In the meanwhile, if you want in the chat to share where you are watching us from and in what career stage you are, it would be really nice. Thank you.
I think we can wait until 2 minutes and then slowly start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that has just joined, if you would like to write on the chat from where you are watching us and which career stage you are, would be great.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy.
We already have some people sharing.
Yes. I think we could slowly start. We have.
Yeah. Yeah, I will do first a presentation, like a really quick one about NCS, and meanwhile, more people will join for the more interesting part of our roundtable. So I will start. Okay. So hello again, everyone. Today we are here in this webinar with the main goal of launching one of NCS's project, which is the Career Hub. I will just start by sharing with you what is the non-conformist scientist. I hope many of you already know this initiative, but I will share it anyway. So basically, the NCS, or the Non-Conformist Scientist, is a non-profit organization that is based in Boston with a local chapter in Portugal. We are composed of 18 Portuguese women spread around Europe and US, but mainly in Boston. We are united by a vision of democratizing science, of giving people that want to have a career in science the tools that they need to develop their career. And to give everyone, no matter where they are, the tools that will make them succeed. So we have 3 different projects. One of them is a podcast where our aim is to inspire people to be leaders in science. And to achieve that, what we do is that we ask people with a leadership career and inspiring career, women, to share their story with us. So by that way, they can inspire other people and show what they can do with a career in science and show that it is possible to succeed. Then we have an events team. This team, like the name says, the goal is to promote different events. We have one partnership with Lisbon PH with webinars on health innovation. And now we are also doing new webinars about career paths in science. So some of them already passed, but we will have others, and I hope you will join the next ones. And then the Career Hub, which is what we are launching here today, which is the aim of this project is to find the best companies in the market that offer career development tools for scientists and to partnership with them, so then we can offer to our members, to NCS members, their services, but with a discounted rate. So today we are announcing our first partnership, and for that we decided to do a webinar with the theme Career Development Strategies in US and Europe, where we will try to understand what are the similarities and difference in career development in the two continents. We'll have two amazing speakers. I won't introduce them now because they will introduce themselves later. Just so you know, the Career Hub team, we are three people currently, me and Ana Raquel, which is also present here in this webinar, and she will be moderating the session. We are the co-team leaders, and then we have Catarina Cruz as a team member, and Ana Cadet, which is the founder of NCS, and I believe many of the people here watching the webinar know her. So this is, as I said, our first partnership. It's with Chaperone. I will soon pass the word to Pedro, so he is from Chaperone, and he will let you know what Chaperone is for the ones that don't know. I just want to ask you to scan this QR code so you can join our newsletter. It's the best way to always keep updated about what's going on NCS. But you should also follow us on Instagram. Anna shares there also what is happening with NCS, and also some personal stories, and it's very interesting. So I ask everyone to follow. And now I will pass the word to Pedro.
Hi everyone. I hope everyone is in a good mood. I see a lot of people from different countries, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I hope that you enjoy this webinar. I will start by congratulating you, non-conform scientists, by the launching of your career hub, and wish you all the best with that. Um, for those who don't know me, I'm a scientist. I spent most of my career doing academic research. I'm celebrating 20 years since I started, 10 years before my PhD and 10 years after my PhD. So a quite symbolic time for me to reflect on what happened since I started. I I did quite a few things in parallel while doing academic research. So I worked with the government in the areas of policy advice. I worked in the third sector with nonprofits. I worked in industry, both in the pharmaceutical industry, but also in companies that do science communication and outreach. So I feel like I've experienced a lot of things with the pros and the cons that takes in terms of career progression. And more recently, I decided to co-found Chaperone together with Joanna Moscoso. And our motivations were mainly due to the lack of career development or career support that we uh, did not have while developing our careers. And we quickly realized this was a global issue. And we thought that we could design a solution that could help to democratize high quality career development in science. It has been a fantastic journey since we started in 2020. We started by empowering individuals, so connecting scientists with career consultants through our online marketplace where they can do online one-to-one sessions. We moved to partner with research institutions and then impacting research institutions in their career development services. And we already work with more than 60 research institutions in more than 10 different countries. And we're now super excited that we are now also already impacting research ecosystems. So, for example, in Angola, we've been working with all the group leaders and evaluators of research grants in giving them training on areas such as project management, grant evaluation, and so on. So the future is bright. I want to mention to you that on the context of this partnership, we decided to give a 10% discount to all the members of the non-conformed scientist network in our platform. So if you are interested, I think you're already seeing a QR code. Feel free to scan it and use it to get in contact with us. I believe this at least. I see it already. It's already also in the chat, so you can copy paste that link in order to get to the same place where the QR code will take you. If for some reason you're experiencing any troubles with that, also feel free to email us at hello@chaperone.online, and we'll be happy to assist you after this webinar. So without further delays, before we move on, also say a special hi to Ines and Joanne. We'll speak soon, but thank you very much for being us with here today.
Thank you, Pedro. And hello, everyone. I see a lot of people from Europe, from the US, early career researchers. So you are on the right place to hear a bit more about what are the differences between these two places. So my name is Ana Raquel Santamaria. I am co-leading the NCS Career Hub together with Elena. And besides working at the NCS, I'm also a scientist. I work at the Wyss Institute at Harvard. And I'm happy now to introduce our speakers. And first of all, also say thank you for your time and for coming today. And I think we can bring Ines and Joanne on stage and kindly introduce yourselves. We can start with Joanne and then follow to Ines.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really fun to be here in my house in the US, speaking to all of you all over the world. It's really fantastic. I'm a molecular geneticist by training. I did my graduate training here in Boston at Harvard in the Division of Medical Sciences. I worked on yeast transcription genetics and then went straight to pharma without doing a postdoc. I also had a baby in graduate school and then went to a German company called BASF here, but they were a part located here in Massachusetts. And then BASF was acquired by Abbott about 7 years into my time there. And I worked for what is now the AbbVie part of Abbott, the immunology indication site in Worcester, for 15 years altogether. Just short of 15 years, like a day or two, I went into biotech at a company called RxI Pharmaceuticals. It's Craig Mello, the Nobel Prize winner in RNAi, founded a startup, and I got to do that for about 4 years. I moved from being the director of research to moving to be in the business development team, doing relationship management based on the science projects that we were doing with other organizations. And then I became the executive director of Addgene. Those of you that are molecular biologists may have heard of Addgene. I was there for 10 years, which was a wonderful time. It's a fantastic place to work, and really made it halfway through pretty much to the end of the pandemic, when we went back in the black from being in the red for not shipping for many months, and then stepped down from that position. And I've been doing diversity and equity work for decades, long before it was cool. And so now what I do with my time is diversity, equity, and culture consulting for mostly STEM-based organizations. I do some career coaching, and I do quite a lot with mentoring programs, and also middle management inclusivity training and learning. So thank you for having me, and I'm very happy to hear from Ines.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you, Joanna. I mean, I actually crossed paths with Joanna on LinkedIn, I think a year ago, and we are supposed to have a virtual coffee. We haven't made it, but maybe after today. I'm really inspired by what Joanna has achieved, so it feels a bit off to come after. So I'm Ines, I'm Portuguese. I have a biology degree, but I haven't been doing any research since 2009. I was in the US a little bit as a US student and a little bit as a Portuguese student. So I was in the advantage position of having a fellowship at the time, and I was a visiting student at Rockefeller University in New York, where I did a PhD in microbiology. Shortly after, I returned to Portugal and worked mainly on scientific training. And that was very much inspired by how doctoral education was done in the US at the time. And I worked then in different places, mainly in Portugal and in Austria. And I'm now based in Luxembourg. So I had to reinvent a little bit myself throughout the years. And I'm now working in also equity and diversity, coordinating a mentoring program. And in the meantime, I got certified as a coach, where I also collaborate with Chaperone on as a career consultant, or I'm not sure what my title in Chaperone is, but it doesn't matter. What it matters is my motivation is to empower people. I am happy when I feel that I can support others in achieving whatever they want to achieve. And that's why it's a pleasure to me to be here today. I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have. And yeah, maybe as a side note, because I like empowering people, I ended up having 4 of my own. So that's also another challenge. And thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for your introductions. So we can initiate the roundtable. We have some questions prepared, but I would challenge the audience to put your questions on the chat. This webinar is for you, and all of the questions, doubts you have 2 amazing experts here with us today, and I'm sure we can address some of your questions. So I'm giving the word to Pedro. He will initiate the questions, but feel free, anyone, to drop questions on the chat. You are muted, Pedro.
Okay, sorry. So I think it would be interesting. I see from the comments in the chat that we have a lot of either PhD students or people who are just finishing their PhD, or PhD seems like a common topic. Either you've already done it or you're about to do it. So I often reflect about the training of a PhD, like what is supposed to do. And there are obvious differences between what we typically do in the US, or what it's typically done in the US, versus what we've done in Europe. I did my PhD in the US. Typically, it's longer. Most of the times, at least in health science, there's teaching assistants involved, and there's a strong power given to the thesis committee in terms of when the applicant is ready to defend or not, which is quite different from most of the cases in Europe. I would like to hear your thoughts, Inez and Joanne, on those differences. Have I missed some important factors, and whether you favor one model versus the other one in terms of career progression in general?
I understood correctly that the question was first directed to me.
You can start, Inez.
Okay. So I think that's a very interesting question for me. Maybe that's why I kind of jumped in. As I said, I went to the US on a fellowship, and at the time in Portugal, so this was 2000, there was no doctoral programs. There was one, maybe, no, 2, the Gulbenkian and the GABA, but they were just not as prominent throughout Europe. And so most people just found a supervisor and did a PhD. So coming to the US and having a chance to participate in courses to see how structured the PhD programs were was mind-blowing. And this is what I decided to take to Portugal. So what I think is very good in the US is the institutional responsibility that exists towards doctoral candidates. You usually have a dean of education, and you have a lot of support towards the students by the institution. So I'm not talking about the thesis committee. I think you are right in terms of defending, but I think there is a fundamental difference which is now changing in Europe, and we see also that there's doctoral schools, and there, for example, here in Luxembourg, we have a doctoral framework to support PhD students. And I think all of those changes have made a huge advance. One thing that I still think works better in the US is that at least the first years of funding are institutional funding. What this allows is that it allows, if things don't go well, it's easier to change labs. In Europe, if the match doesn't really work, and sometimes that happens, it's much more difficult because the funding is usually associated to one PI, one supervisor, and the institution can support, but there is little that can do. So this is one thing that still works better in the funding scheme in the funding system of the US. I had an opportunity to collaborate or advise a PhD program in Austria at the Institute of Science and Technology that follows the American system, let's say. And I think they had very good things. For me, it depends a lot on how you start your PhD. So if you start already with a very clear idea of what you want to do, and you found already a group that can nurture you and support your and help you, I think then an European style PhD is fine. If you have no if you have no idea where to start, I think then maybe the US offers more opportunities. And the other differences, I think, are also very much dependent on the institution. Yes, the thesis committee has a lot of power, but on the other system, the supervisor has a lot of power. And I've also seen many conflicts arising from that. Joanne, I pass to you.
Yeah, so to be honest, I think the systems in different countries are very different, and I did all of my work here in the U.S., so Inez knows much more about the European systems. I would say we have a lot of fatal flaws here in the U.S. system, despite the funding advantage in the first couple of years. That certainly is an advantage, and I agree very much with that. I think the PI power in the university here is unwarranted and damaging. There is no, those lab heads have no supervision. There is no boss for them. They are unaccountable to anyone for their behavior. And that leads to a very high level of bullying and harassment and unethical behavior. Not every mentor. I had a fantastic mentor, by the way, and there are many fantastic mentor PIs out there. You're actually, as a graduate student, you are being underpaid for your level of education and talent to get an education. You're essentially paying tuition, regardless of what stipend they're paying you, because you could get a job worth 10 times more in a heartbeat after your college degree. And what happens for many students, at least in the US, and I think also overseas, is trainees enter that program and they're not given training. They're just treated like technicians or with very little mentorship and teaching, and not prepared for a career. They're prepared because they only see the academic career. They don't see the 85% of other things that they need to do, in order to advance and continue being a scientist. So that is, many organizations offer some career work, but it's not mandatory. It's rarely mandatory. And I will go to an organization with 1,000 graduate students and 20 people will come to hear my talk about how to transition into a career from their training. So for some reason, we see academia in America like you're supposed to become an academic and anything else is a problem. But in every other field, when you have done with school, you get a job, and that job can be anything, So we have a real fatal flaw in this. Is like the president of a university is not a boss; they're a fundraiser. They're not a leader. And so every professional, every lab head is rogue, is in my opinion, and that leads to a lot of inequities. A lot of problems that are nowhere near being addressed and searched. And so, for example, one damaging statistic is that in the US, 65% of women in organizations admit to having been sexually harassed during their graduate training. And that is the highest level of harassment in any field except the military here in the US. And the military has some accountability and they're doing something about it. In the academy, not so much. So there are many efforts to stem that, and I'm working on a systemic level, but on an individual level for individuals, my advice is to vet extremely carefully the lab that you join and the organization. And maybe we'll have time to talk about how to do that. But, I have had conversations with people where they've come to me and said, I want to join this lab. But someone told me that the PI, when he assigns first authorship on a paper, he decides who gets to be first author. It's not the person who led the work. And I said, that's unethical and is not correct. So you shouldn't go to that lab, and they went to that lab and it was a nightmare for them. And it took them years to disentangle from a very unethical, poor supervisor. So what I hear is many trainees ignore the warning signs, or they get really excited about the paper that just came out in Cell, and they join a lab and they don't do their due diligence. And I would like to see the trainees using their feet to vote for the good mentors and going to them. That's especially true of postdocs now, because we have a postdoc shortage in this country. And I would love to see them choosing great labs with great mentors for their training work. So I don't know if that was directly answered your question, but that is the perception I have of the U.S. training system right now.
Thank you very much both for your answers and really interesting points.
Yes, indeed. And still on the same topic a little bit, and taking in consideration the differences between the United States and the European universities and also countries and all what you have mentioned. And I know majority, we see our audience, there are a lot of PhD students, so probably they are having this question that is, what do I do next? And I think a lot of us face that question a lot of times. So what would you advise to these young professionals to help navigate them the question of what to do next? Even maybe even choosing the lab as a postdoc, that we could go that way too, can be very interesting. So maybe Joanne, you could start, and then we could give it to Inês.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I've spoken on this topic fairly widely. So I'm happy to post some links to some blogs and talks that I've given on how to choose a lab. So what can I do next? If you are in the position to carefully choose a lab, please seek advice. We can't give all of it here in this time frame. I will try and post some links, but go online. You have the internet. You have no excuse. We didn't have the internet. Go to the lab, see who published with that PI, and look them up on LinkedIn and find them and have a virtual conversation with them. Alumni of the lab are more likely to be forthcoming about their experience. And you can ask non-threatening questions. Like, I wouldn't ask them, were you harassed by the PI? They may not be willing to do it. But you can say, would you choose that lab again? Would it be your first choice? There's some subtle questions you can ask to get an idea of choosing lab. So what next? If you're choosing a lab, please do that carefully. I have a lot more advice about that. If you're talking about choosing a career, you cannot start too early in learning about other careers, because all you see on your day-to-day is running a lab in academia. And that is only 10 to 15% of the current graduates are going to have a career in academia 5 years from now. I think that's maybe even an exaggeration. So what are the other 85 to 90% of you going to do? We want you to continue to be scientists. The good news is not everyone belongs in academia. There are great careers in science doing other things. I have had a fantastic career that I've loved and learned at every stage. And so not everyone belongs in academia, to be honest. So it's not, don't feel bad. It's not, it's a very specific profile of who should, and by the way, I'm not discouraging. We need diverse, inclusive, excellent mentors in our training system. I'm not saying none of you should do it. I'm just not saying all of you should do it. And you don't have enough jobs. So you cannot start too early. And the best thing you can do is meet people who are not in academia. So get involved in NCS, get involved in Association for Women in Science, get involved in your local bio group, start a biotech club, take a class. One of my biggest regrets is about graduate school. I'm at Harvard, which is blew my mind when I got accepted to Harvard. I took my minimum 8 classes and didn't sit in on another class for 6 years. Boy, was that nuts. I could have sat in on MBA courses, biotechnology. I could have audited any classes as a student at Harvard, right? And did not take advantage of any of that. That was insanely bad judgment. And so, even if I would have just done more chemistry, I went to work at a pharmaceutical company and I was terrible at chemistry, at organic chemistry, and there were so many things that would have been useful. So I really dedicate yourself to finding other ways to, broaden your horizons and your exposure. I'm sure Inês will say this, and I know the non-conformist scientists will say this. It's the people that are going to get you jobs after your training. And so meet some people.
I completely agree with everything that Joanne is saying. But I would add another thing, which is take time to think. Take time to think about what you want. Take time to think about what you need. Take time to think about what your values are. All of these things, self-awareness can help you a lot making choices. And one thing that I see is that people are too busy. They are too busy reacting to things, and they don't take the time to actually think about what they want and how to get there. So my main advice is to take time to think, but also, as Joanne say, get to know people, leave your comfort zone. Find you meet someone interesting, ask them about it. So most people love to talk about themselves. So you don't ask them for a job necessarily. You just, I meet Anna now. I think Anna sounds really interesting. So I try to find out more about Anna. What does she like? Why did she choose the career path that she chose? And you listen and you learn and you get inspired. So talking to others, finding other people, and then also take the opportunities. Don't be too focused on your own research. Of course, it takes time. I'm not saying that you should not give it 100%, but find times also to do things. I will never forget, and I want to give this example because I think it illustrates well. When I moved, when I was in Portugal at some point, there was this opportunity. I saw that the European Commission was launching a call for organizing the European Researchers' Night. I was not doing anything regarding science communication at the time, but I approached my then colleague, Anna Gulbenkian, and I said, Anna, why don't we apply to this? So me, Anna, and Maria João, knowing nothing about the call, just applied, completely naive. And we actually got it. So we didn't get it alone. We were forced, well, not forced, but it was a great experience. We had to partner with another institution that had more experience in organizing these types of things, which was great because we learned a lot. And since then, I've been involved in many science communications. I now work as an evaluator for the night, for the Marie Curie actions. And this was just something that kind of passed and looked interesting and looked exciting. And I just took it. And so don't be afraid of just taking the opportunities. Try things out. If you have an important opportunity to do an internship, do it. And talk to people. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think those are very great points. So I'm trying to summarize a little bit. So basically what both of you touched was to take advantage of your institution. So where you are, try to understand if you can take advantage of courses, workshops, do a lot of networking, get out of your comfort zone, and take time to think of what are the next steps. So I think that's a very good takeaway message home about it. And I see Joanne has put some interesting materials. Yes, Inês?
I have to say, everything that you're saying now, Anna, and that we said, can be daunting. It can seem incredibly difficult. But and I can see it. So I don't say, don't feel bad if you feel that you cannot do it. Just find someone who can help you get there, who can help you in the small steps to get there. Yes, it can be daunting. We make it sound easy, and it's not so easy when we are in your position. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And for example, I can give my experience. I'm early career researcher, so I start my postdoc 3 years ago. So getting to know people and getting slowly out of the comfort zone is a big step to get to know what to do. What do I do next? So definitely, and it's not easy, but you have to do step by step. That's my feeling too, at least my experience.
And I'll speak up for Chaperone if Pedro won't. I mean, an hour with a coach can go a long way, just 1 hour. And, it may cost you something, but, I do I have a package where I do just 3 hours with people, and it's an investment, but actually I find that when they pay, they take it more seriously. So, having someone to talk to that's a professional, other people do that. I don't know why we don't do it. It's not a thing you shouldn't do, So, and if you can't, there are many volunteers who will help you, but that's another track that you can take, is to work with a professional.
Totally.
Super interesting points. And one thing that I would also add, like I was reflecting while you're speaking, is like, if you're in early stage of your career, following up a little bit on what Inês was saying now in her last point, also there's a lot of room for exploration, right? And for you can explore and learn, and nothing is like too important or too fixed that you cannot like pivot afterwards. So even the decision of going or leaving academia or not, like I've left academia and came back. I'm about to leave again. Who knows if I come back again? So even those decisions are not like super important if you're early stage in your career. I think this conversation also leads me to my next question to both of you, and maybe now it's Inês turn to start. Like you are working with many different scientists from different contexts. What is the most frequent pain point you observe when talking to them? What do you think it's like really hurting scientist progression these days?
Well, I don't think if this is the one thing hurting scientist progression, but I do think one important thing is taking things personally. And science is a lot about outcomes, and usually the outcomes that are considered now are publications. And for publications, you need to be first author, at least in STEM, right? This would vary field to field, but all the things feel very personal. So if you don't make it, it feels personal, right? It's your project. It's an individual project. While, for example, I had this discussion also with someone in a startup. If a startup fails, people don't feel it as a personal. They tried it, they made their best, and they move on to the next one. But in academia, it feels personal. And we are trained that it feels personal. So one of my now missions, I don't know if I could call it a mission, but whenever I train or talk to students and postdocs, I say you have to separate the two. You have to separate your professional development from your research project. And any failures or setbacks on your research project do not influence what you are learning and what you're developing as a professional. So that is my advice or point for reflection. Think about you as a professional, as an individual, what skills you want to develop, how you want to be seen, where you want to go, and then think about your research project. Yes, the two are linked, but they are different things. And a failure in a research project, well, one thing, science is made of failure. So failure is part of the process and you cannot avoid it. But it's not personal. It's not personal. And you need to surround yourself with people that help you make that distinction.
Yeah, that's good. I second that, everything. You're not learning what you learn, you're learning how to learn. Scientists are good at solving problems, learning how to, I lived nothing better in pharma than when someone came to me, we don't know anything about this disease. Could you learn about it? I'd be like, yes, I want to learn about a new disease, right? And so that's what we love to do, actually. We love to learn. So I would say that and if your mentor is treating you like just a grind to create papers, that's not what you need to get out of it. I'm going to tell you a little secret about non-academia. No one cares about your papers. And so in academia, that's the product. In academia, the product is knowledge. Outside of academia, that is not the product. And so I have hired many people who have not published papers because I know how hard it is to publish. The publishing system is broken and messed up, right? So I'm not going to have a talented student whose paper is in publication for 2 years because it's held up by some editor, not give them an opportunity if they can demonstrate to me a knowledge understanding of research and how to do things and how to learn and taking initiative. That's much more important to me than their actual publication record. So, I have resumes where people are like so proud of their papers and I'm like, tell me what you did. How did you work with people? Did you lead anybody? Did you mentor anybody? Did you have a student that you taught in the lab? What did you volunteer for? What were you active in? And so I'm much more likely to hire someone that was the head of their postdoc association than someone who has 5 papers, to be honest with you. And so I think that that's a misunderstanding. I have talked to so many trainees who say, I'm ready to leave the lab, but I'm going to finish this one last paper. I've even had people say to me, I have a job offer, but I'm not going to take it because I'm going to stay and finish this one last paper. And I'm like, you are out of your mind. You do not owe anything to the lab aside from the very inexpensive labor that you have provided for all of these years. Wrap it up, get out. So if you plan to, now that's not true if you plan to go on an academic path. The priorities are different. You must publish, and so I'm that advice is don't take. I don't want to ruin the whole academic achievement process for anybody. But I think, you have a lot that you're ready to do once you have your PhD.
We do have some questions on the chat. I don't know if you want to say anything, Pedro, but I will just jump to the question and then you can comment. So one of the questions is, what if our cluster is not interested in including us? And I think this was a little bit still from the previous topic, not this topic. So Joanne or Inish, would you like to comment?
I'm not sure what that means. Our cluster. What is the cluster? Is that a term that I don't understand?
I believe it should be like the closest environment, like probably the lab where it is inserted, but you can comment on the chat, Sarah, if you would like more details. But I believe it's the environment around you.
Yeah, I mean,
I was also a bit puzzled.
Yeah, if you're in a toxic lab, I give this advice and I help people a lot. You should get out. The earlier you can get out, the better. Unless you're like 5 years in and you just have to, get through and get the heck out of there. But if you're a couple years in and it's not good, you're not getting the training and the atmosphere that you need to grow and develop. You should leave. You're wasting your time and your money and your earning potential. And that can be challenging to switch to a new role. But I've helped a lot of, particularly women. And I don't want to generalize, but I do speak with more women who suffer sort of harassment and berating behavior in the lab. I speak to some men as well. There are bullies that bully everybody, but it does. There are biases against women where they're treated poorly, particularly women who have visa issues. That's a problem that I see a lot. Their PIs think that because they're hostage to their visa that they can treat them any way they want. And that's very, very sad. So I would say, if you are in 1 or 2 years into a degree or a program or a project and you are being really treated poorly, I would say try to leave and transfer to a better environment. And if not, I think you should seek support, whether that's a coach or allies or a women's group or a colleague group. It doesn't have to be women. Other mentors at the organization that can support you while you try to move your way through. I know that's hard to do, but it's really real years of your life that you are sacrificing, essentially. And again, pivotal earning power and everything else. So you really have to look out for yourself in that situation. So I don't know if that's making it look too bleak, but
no, I totally agree. I'm on the same opinion. I mean, the 5 years often for me, if I'm talking about European PhD students, I would say if you're already in the middle of your 3rd year and you can just push it through and get it done, then get it done. But if you're in the beginning and you think you should leave, then leave. And 1 year or 2 years might seem like a lot of time, but it actually isn't. And in the long run, it's better to leave and to find an environment that nurtures and supports you. What I would do is, for example, I would not say that the lab where I was at the Rockefeller was a bad environment, not at all. But it was not everything that I was looking for. And so I did look around. So I looked around and I found other things that inspired me. And I didn't have a bad experience exactly, but I was looking for other things. And so I looked around and looked for groups where I did feel included and where I could be the things that I wanted to be and do, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally. We have more questions, so I'm going to follow to the next question. So the next question is, any advice after, so probably a lot of years at lab bench or with the PhD work and a bit tired of the R&D research, but for R&D experts by companies, they are usually not suitable for the position. So do you have any suggestions or advice on this for this question?
I think if you have been already in a lab for many years, then it is more difficult, I think, to make the transition. But it is more difficult also because often it's more difficult for you to kind of portray yourself and position yourself in something else than a scientist. And so this is where I think talking to someone, a professional, probably will be tremendously helpful, because you basically need to figure out what is it that you want to do. It's not black or white, right? It's not academia versus industry. When we talk about industry, there's so many different types. There's marketing, there's communication, there's mentoring. I mean, there's many different things. And you need to figure out, you cannot just knock on someone's door and say, look, I don't no longer want to be a lab scientist, but I'm not sure what I want to do. So I think the effort there should be on trying to figure out what is it that you like. And try not to kind of be very black or white. I don't come up with a better expression, but again, try talking to people, try to figure out what are different roles and what are different jobs and what tasks would you like to be doing. Maybe instead of thinking about a job position, think about what would you like to spend your day doing.
I think that's great. And mentors can help you. So if you can get yourself into a good mentoring program or find some really good mentors, they're often a big help at elucidating what are the parts of your job that you like and are good at, as opposed to the required parts of a job. Yeah, I mean, I did 20 some years at the bench before I moved into a managerial role. I was good at managing people, so that was a way for me to display another talent. My teams were successful, they grew, we produced for the company. So, I was able to move into management, and then that allowed me to have more decision-making involvement. So it was a very gradual, I basically raised my hand and volunteered for everything. Run a project in Japan. Sure, I'll do that. Go tour the plant in the back, learn about manufacturing. Sure, I want to learn about manufacturing. So, I basically tried to just use the advantage of being in a large organization like a pharmaceutical company to learn all the things and explore what things were fun for me, what things I was effective, where I was making a difference. And so if you're not getting promoted, and in most large companies, you do get promoted into managerial or responsibility roles based on your experience, then you might not be in the right place. It might not be a place that's fostering your learning and your ability to get involved and have other growth opportunities. So, I mean, I know we can't all change jobs on a dime. That's not always easy, but you're probably not in a place that's fostering you. My transition was sort of normal. I mean, also what Ines was saying, it's not your last job, it's just your next job. Only in academia do you hit your last job. You can change if you hate it. So take a chance. Like, I was working in pharma for 15 years and I had lunch with someone who said, hey, do you want to come work in our biotech? And I was like, yeah, it sounds fun. Like the leap position can be very, fun to do something new and do something hard. And for me, I always wanted to do something difficult. So, I had gotten a little complacent in my job in pharma, and this sounded like it would be challenging and exciting, and it certainly was, So I think it's keeping that network alive for opportunities and people that can see your growth, and be doing extracurricular work. So a lot of my work with the Association for Women in Science gave me leadership opportunities, speaking, organizing, event organization, recruiting, managing without authority, all kinds of other skills that made me a good candidate for a director position in biotech, which is where I went, after that. So I think but I think, as you said something really important, if your resume just looks like you're a bench scientist, then you're a bench scientist. And that's, so if you can't tell a story convincingly with your resume, and I'm sure Chaperone helps with this as well, like your LinkedIn, there's a lot of things you can do with your story and your narrative that can make you an appealing candidate for multiple. And I'm not saying make stuff up, not by any stretch of the imagination, but you can describe your work. You can say, I ran, 500,000 compounds through an assay that I automated, or you can say, I led a team of 8 scientists in a highly collaborative, difficult project, overcame hurdles, and came in under budget and ahead of schedule on a large screening project. That would be a much better thing to put on your LinkedIn than I know how to make cell assays, and so there are ways to take your experience and spin it, and again, not in the making up stuff way, so that it tells you a story of you as a different person.
Okay, thank you for both. We have other questions and they are related. So any difference in the way the industry sees researchers in US or Europe? And I think the other one is related to this one. Do you recommend different approaches on how to address the job market in the US versus Europe?
Joanne, I would let you take a lead here.
Yeah, I don't know as much about Europe. I'm sorry, I never had to do that, although I've interacted with many people through Agene and through other ways. I don't think. I mean, the job market's always a challenge to get a job. I would say here in the United States, it's a bit of a rough year. We've had a lot of layoffs in the, but there's. Ines said this. It's not. I don't like to use the word industry because there's government, policy, advocacy, nonprofit, patient advocacy, medical writing. I could go on. I have a slide with about 400 possible jobs that scientists can do, So if you see it that way, if you see that opportunity for things and a little open-minded, and, the job you're looking for isn't always the one you get if you're networking appropriately. So I feel like it's tough. I think in the US, a lot of people here get jobs by referral because we're very, so one statistic I saw in a recent study is that for a position, 5% of the resumes were referral, but 40% of the hires were from referrals. So you're all scientists, y'all can figure out what that means. It's a very overrepresentation of someone who introduced you to the job. And why is that? Because we like to know somebody a little bit. We like to know that we're hiring someone who will be pleasant and add to our team and not be a challenging person to work with. So a personal referral is a very strong way. So in the US, and especially I know Boston the best, but I think this is true. The more people you know, the more opportunities you're going to have to help. And I have a few blogs on that topic as well, how to get your resume on someone's desk. You got to know people. And all of the jobs I ever got were through connections, and most of them were never advertised. So there was no way for me to send a resume in online. The only way was to know a person who could tell me about a position. So I assume that is somewhat true in Europe. It's still who you know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I don't think that there's so many differences. I do think there are certain things that are cultural, and it's not US versus Europe, and it could be country specific. So,
Yeah.
for example, CVs are slightly different in Europe than are in the US. So, if you're applying to jobs, it's good to talk to someone who knows the country, who knows the specificities of the country, to try to tailor it in the right way. There was also a question at some point about the language. I think the language, I've worked in Austria without German, and I came to Luxembourg without French. Well, anyway, it is helpful. So I think if you go to a different country, you should invest time in learning the local language because it can help you also in other things. But I don't think there are so many differences. The main differences could be cultural, and so that then we cannot put Europe in the same bag because it's very different if you apply to Germany or to France. What I do think, again, it helps is talk to people who are working and who know a little bit about the job market in the country where you're applying and try to figure it out. To share a personal story, I moved to Vienna because I found a job for me and my husband went with me. I moved to Luxembourg because my husband found a job and I moved with him. Since in Luxembourg, if it's a tiny country, but I've met many women and men who are like the trailing spouses. I even learned that there is a syndrome called the trailing spouse. Yes, there's more women, but there's also men. I wanted to make that point. And I think when you are a trailing spouse and when you have this dual body issue, sometimes you need to be a little bit more flexible and you need to reinvent yourself a little bit. And I've met amazing women. The other day I was in a networking event with a person from Mexico who used to have a top job in Mexico and moved to Luxembourg. And what happened was that she took maybe a job that was a step down from what she had, but clearly she had the competencies and skills. So very quickly she was promoted and went up. So sometimes it's a little bit, you have to also be a little bit flexible to find your way depending on where you want to go. And if you want to make a big change or move to a sector completely different from yours, I think you have to be able to step down and learn. But in my experience, most scientists that I know very quickly then are promoted and then learn and build up. So the learning curve is quite steep, is quite fast. Not maybe steep, but goes fast.
Thank you. jumping to another question that we have on the chat. So what's your opinion in staying in the same lab as a postdoc where we did the PhD?
I think
would
that
not
is a
recommend
bad
it.
idea. Yeah. Oh, Ines, you have. Did you? Did we agree or did we disagree?
We agree. We agree. Don't do
Okay,
it.
good. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's a bad idea.
Don't do it.
Okay, so that was a quick one. So last question from the chat for now. So could this be, so I'm a scientist who is currently experiencing a career transition process without a job. Could this be a possible problem to be employed in the US or Europe industry job market?
I'm not sure what that means. I mean, you don't ever have a job when you have a career transition. So I'm not sure that that's what job hunting is about. You're looking for a job. So it's only a problem in that you have to find a job, which is hard, you know. But so I don't see it as a that is the nature of transitioning. That is what everyone does. Everyone goes to school or you know, everyone finishes their education and then they get a job. That is what we do. If you mean that you're changing fields, like you're changing what you are, then that has to do, I think, with your qualifications and your network and having an opportunity to do something very different, perhaps. But it's a little hard for me to understand the question.
I'm reading the question as an issue on gaps in your CV. And if that's the case, I think you should, as much as possible, avoid gaps. And I will come on strategies to avoid gaps, because when you come to an interview, you can explain the gaps. But if you are going to face a selection on the CV, then you don't want to raise issues with the CV. So you want the CV to flow to the next level. One way of doing that, for example, is doing freelance work, or you are studying, or you are investing in learning something new, or you often, with women, you do a career break for parenting, for example. I think in your CV, I would try to, again, not lie. I would always be authentic, but try to find ways that you explain what happened. But this depends a lot on the amount of time. It depends a lot on the amount of time that the career transition process goes. And if it's a couple of months, I think there's no need to explain it. But if then it comes to a year, then maybe you want to put something on the CV that tells people what you're doing, because you're probably not just looking for a job, right? Probably you're doing many other things. You're going through trainings, or you're volunteering here, or you're, I don't know, doing other things that can, again, get you the skills that could even be more important to get you that job. So I would just try to put that in.
Thank you very much. So I don't have more questions at the chat at the moment. And Pedro, we are almost reaching the end of the webinar. Pedro, would you like to make like a really fast question and to close the session?
Maybe not a question, but a wrap up or a summary of some of the things we talked here today. And I think some of the key messages that came through, at least for me, was don't manage your career alone. There's a lot of people that can help you, and that's the best way to do it. You have mentors, you have career counselors, you have career advisors, you have career coaches. There's a lot of people with different expertise in different roles that can help you navigate careers. And careers today are highly complex. The job market is volatile, is uncertain. The strategy that you use to progress in your career these days could not be the same as our parents did back 30 years ago or so. So don't do it alone. The other key message that came through for me was networking is key. You and this is a little bit different from getting help from someone. Is about like increasing, like, you can be the best person doing something, but if only 10 people know that you're the best person doing something, then you're limited to that. You want as much people as possible to know that you're good at whatever you're good at. And the third thing is personalization of your applications, right? So we talked about job, country specific and institution specific kind of things, but investing time in your applications, whether it's a career transition from fields or industries, like you should personalize your application to the job, the country you're applying, the institution that you're applying, even the team that you're going to work with or the company. So invest time in that, because job market is highly competitive, and if you don't spend that time, you're going to be overcome by other people. So those are I think what main points for me. So thank you very much, Joanne and Ines and everyone who joined here today. And
Yeah.
I leave the room to you, Anna.
Thank you. So thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Inês. Thank you, Joanne, for today's webinar. I invite the audience to connect with all of the speakers and us as well. For sure, you will increase your network and you will have other opportunities that you could be aware of. So don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, the NCS newsletter. You have the QR code here. And if you would like to get the 10% discount from the NCS chaperone collaboration, please go ahead and also take the QR code. And I think there is also on the chat the link. So please go ahead. And thank you once again for being here. And I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.